Howdy once again, it's Mr. Pete, your YouTube shop teacher. Here today to talk about my new Craftsman 15-inch metal cutting vertical contour saw. And I've been looking for one of these for a long time. Watch the previous video where I show a couple clips of where I bought it for under $200, and it was an online auction. You didn't have to be present to make the purchase or bid, and it was 20 miles from my house for the pickup. So take a look at that. I'll put the link down below. This saw was purchased in 2011 by a 90-year-old man, or I should say he's 90 years old now. He's incapacitated and can no longer work. I did talk to him, a nice guy. He paid $950 for it at that time, and it is the Craftsman Professional, not the amateur. 3-speed. And this is a first for me. Never in my life, I've been around a lot of bandsaws, did it ever actually tell you the only information you really need to know, and that is the blade length. 111, and I just ordered 4 of them from KBC Tools. They should be here in a day or two. 1.5 horsepower Chinese motor, and it is made in Taiwan. I figured it wasn't American made, but looks to be a good saw, and what this is all about is slow speed. I made I don't know how many videos regarding slowing these bandsaws down, wood cutting bandsaws down to a speed that could be used for cutting metal. So this has 3 speeds, 80 feet per minute, 150 and 200. 80 is what I'll use most of the time for steel. The former owner told me that he only used it a couple of times, and that's when he got sick. Never did use it again. But of course a neighbor or somebody came in and said, "Hey, can I use your bandsaw?" "Ah, help yourself." And immediately ruined the blade, kicked the blade off and the tire off, and he said he never used it after that. And there's still packing grease on some of the parts. There is rust. Somebody put a wet rag on the cast iron table, so it's pretty rusty. So that's one of the things that I'll have to work on. I'll have to learn how to remove rust. Oh, that's right, I made 15 videos on that. I need to go back and review them. You know what's interesting to note here, and it kind of surprised me, is that the wheel is cast iron. We're not talking about chintzy aluminum. They don't appear to be balanced, obviously, or it wouldn't continue to try to find the heavy spot down in the bottom. I don't think it matters that they're balanced on a slow-speed saw, but I tell you, this thing would walk all over the place if it was a high-speed woodcutter. They really need to be balanced. So the whole purpose of this video, and actually it'll be a series of videos, I don't know how many, but I am going to critique this saw from 2 standpoints. One, just the general design and usefulness, and I'll talk about all those features. And there are several issues with this that need to be repaired before I use it. I'm going to talk about that and probably even show you the repairs or a portion of the repairs. I'm sure that no parts are available. Of course, on the back side here it tells you to call Sears for any part you may need. Well, I checked online for parts for that other Craftsman little horizontal saw, you might remember that, and that was listed on there with parts diagrams, but no matter what part you looked at, it said no longer available. You may recall this 14-inch Powermatic wood cutting saw that I was going to convert into a metal cutting and never did get around to it. I think it's a little too far gone to repair, and that's why I bought the Craftsman. You may want to watch this video where I actually purchase and load up the bandsaw. This is a page out of the 1994 Sears Craftsman tool catalog, and there is my saw, only it's the woodworking version. Apparently at that time they still hadn't decided to offer the metal cutting version, and I cannot find a catalog that shows that, but again, the man told me he paid about $950 for it in 2011. Okay, continuing the analysis of this machine, it is all made of heavy gauge sheet steel which I think makes it quite rigid. And you say, what, no castings? Well, all of the Dual and Grobe bandsaws were made simply of sheet metal, heavy sheet metal, heavier than this obviously, and were very rigid. However, there is a cast iron table here that I talked about, extremely rusty. I love the hinged doors. Nothing more pain in the neck than the Delta Rockwell ones where you have to take two knobs off in order to take the covers off. So this will open very quickly, a really neat feature, I think. I have not cleaned the saw yet, but you can see there's very little sawdust down here. But we got a little brush right here that will clean the blade, but that would cause the sawdust to fall down into this area. There is a little chute right here for the sawdust, and it will come out this slot for easy cleanup. The machine is extremely well guarded without any moving parts, and even the blade is covered right here, so the only thing you got to worry about is this little area right here, and keep your fingers out of there. My garage floor is extremely unlevel, and I would suppose that the machine itself is not that true on the bottom. So I will have to either shim it or use some hold downs or some feet. Really what I need is feet, and there are 4 holes that will accommodate those. The switch is mounted in an extremely convenient and safe position. I told you when I got this, the rubber tire for the lower wheel was tangled all up in there along with the damaged blade. So I'm going to put this on right now, and it really should be glued on. Apparently it was not glued on at the factory because the top one is not glued. It's just on there, but I hope that isn't a problem. This doesn't seem to be damaged. I'm going to put it back on right now. I immediately noticed when I bought it that the knob right here that will lock the movement of the lower or the upper blade guide is broken off. It was plastic, poor choice of materials, but I think I'll replace it with another plastic knob that I had in stock. And even though this is made in China, this is 5/16 18 thread. That kind of surprises me. But what I do like here, and that tightens down nicely now, I love this rack and pinion system here of raising and lowering the blade, because it will not come down and smash your fingers. I might have already told you that it came with the original manual. He dug that out for me. I told you he was a nice guy, and he wasn't kidding when he said he'd find it. The fence is amazingly heavy. It is cast iron. I thought maybe it would be stamped sheet metal or aluminum, but it is cast iron. So, and it is held in place by a key. I'll put that on in a second. The only thing I don't like about it is this knob has way too much thread sticking out. It looks unsightly, so I will shorten that. It also came with a miter gauge, which looks kind of cheap really and chintzy, but yet it'll be sufficient. And I really don't use a miter gauge or a fence very often, certainly not with metal. I do with woodworking, but I have Delta saws for that. Also a container here with these cheap looking Chinese adjusting wrenches. I don't like. And looking at the table from this view, you can see the key and the key slot. And then can be locked down, but again, way too much thread here. Doesn't really hurt anything. I just don't like the looks of it, like they didn't go to the effort of doing it right. The miter gauge, well, this needs to be cleaned up, but it has this little feature here, and this is actually a T-slot, so that the miter gauge won't fall on your feet when you extend it way out. It is captured. Normally gravity will drop them, so they went to an extra effort to do that. looking at the very top of the saw, and this is about 5 foot 10 inches, 5 foot 8 inches high. This is the knob for tensioning the blade, and surprisingly enough, there's a lifting eye up here, probably used at the factory to move these around. They had them hanging like meat on meat hooks, I suppose, while they're working on them. And here is the tracking knob on the back side. You can see that it's welded, and there are some braces here, so I hope that it is as rigid as it. This cover, and there's speed chart right here, will lift right off like that. Set that aside, and you can see the motor and the 3-step pulley. And what sets this machine apart from the others is that gearbox. The gearbox is of extremely heavy construction. That is cast iron with a zerk on the top. It is not bathed in oil, and I'm not sure if the zerk goes right onto a shaft or just allows some grease to drop on the gears. I'll show you a quick picture in the parts book of what it looks like on the inside, although it's kind of hard to understand from the picture. Here's the gearbox. If I can zoom in a little bit, I don't know if it'll show up. But what it amounts to is that there's the case, and there are 2 large gears, and then the 2 smaller gears are right on the shafts, and you can't even tell from the picture that they are gears, but I'm going by what it says in the parts breakdown. It is set on the slowest speed right now, and we have about a 10-inch pulley on the top at the largest step, and about a 3-incher on the bottom. So we got a pretty good reduction there even before it goes into the gearbox. And from this side it appears to be turning real fast. In fact, it is, but it hasn't gone through the gearbox, so we'll take a look on the other side and you'll see how slowly the wheel is turning. Sears always use these little safety switches, which I really don't like. They're such a gimmick, and it seems so cheap. But if you don't have it in there all the way, she isn't going to. There it goes. And you can see how slowly it's moving. I don't know what the RPM offhand is. I'll have to check that, but that's now turning at a speed of 80 feet per minute. My neighbor, the gunsmith, Richard, came over as I was unloading this, and he's got a pretty good eye, but he likes to look for bad things too. And he found a couple. To start with, he said, "You got a bend here." And I'm not sure if you can see that in the video, but if you lay a straight edge here, you can see that this piece is bent. And we don't know if it got bent at the factory or in shipping or by mishandling. This is a piece of aluminum extrusion. I'm going to try to straighten it. If it does not straighten, I will have to make a new one, but it is 18 inches long. And I would have to make it out of course, bar stock, and it is a rather odd size, so I would have to mill it. It appears to be in metric. And zooming in for a close-up, it is damaged right here, like it got a good whack from someplace along the line. Looking at the upper blade guide, you can see that they have these 2 guides here way off center. Normally, if everything was set up right, that slot there should be about in the middle here, and obviously it was moved to the side to accommodate and make up for the bend that I showed you moments ago. Okay, take a look at this. I just moved the guides in, and by the way, they're round guides rather than square, which would make it far easier to manufacture and to make new guides if I ever need them. But I pinched my ruler. Can you tell that this is my 6-inch ruler? I mean scale. Ruler is Queen Elizabeth. But look at how far out of square this is now, and I'm not sure that shows up in the video, but this thing is pointing west because of that bend in the extruded aluminum. So you can see that that has to be corrected, and that may be the root cause of all the problems that, well, there couldn't have been too many problems because it has very little use, but maybe that is why the blade was immediately damaged, or, well, I don't know what happened. We'll never know, and it doesn't matter because I intend to fix it. Here's something I don't like, but yet there's a lot of things I don't like. Have you ever noticed that? But look at, we expect the wheel to tip like this. That's for tracking. That's designed that way. But I don't know why there's so much slop this way. Well, I already took the snap ring off so I can pull the wheel off, and it... Wow, was that wheel heavy. In fact, I weighed it. It is 12 pounds. But I do not like the mechanism up here. It just seems real chintzy with a lot of play. Let me zoom in on that. You see, it looks cheap, it looks simple from stampings. Even double nutting something looks like it's makeshift, like something we do in our own garage, not in a factory. I just don't, that doesn't look quality. But look at the play here now. As I take, this is the axle. So ultimately, maybe I'm imagining this and it really doesn't matter at all, but if I do have problems with tracking and all of that, I will take this back apart, either shim this or remake some of the parts, machine them properly, rather than just this, what looks like a real chintzy mechanism. We shouldn't have any play right there. But maybe the blade will track and pull its, guide the wheel so that it ends up where it needs to be. Also notice here we got bracing right here and here to stiffen it. Now I'm going to put this back on and not think any more about it, but while I'm here you can see, this is the aluminum guide again. They just used a nylon gear here. That saddens me. The rack is aluminum, but it doesn't need to be that stiff, I guess. But looking at it from the top here, I'll move the camera and you can see that it is hollow. It is an extrusion. Now look at the belt. From 10 feet away you can tell that one of the pulleys is in the wrong position. We'll pick on the lower one because that'll be the easiest one to adjust. But holding a straight edge right there, you can see that it's about 3/16 off, so I will loosen up the lower pulley and move it to the left about 3/16, no big deal. And that wouldn't really even hurt anything. The rubber will accommodate that. Might shorten belt life, but I doubt it. I'm sure they struggle a little bit manufacturing these, but it's a weldment. This whole thing is a weldment. It wouldn't be that true, but look at the way the gearbox is attached onto the bandsaw frame with 4 bolts, but there's also 4 other bolts right here whose head is not, those are adjustment screws that, this is what actually tightens it, but you can move the gearbox in and out and up and down all kinds of directions so that that wheel mounted on the other side of this gearbox will have the alignment that they want, and you can see the same thing down there. Actually, I think that's brilliant engineering there, not just to compensate from their inaccuracies. The entire motor is mounted incorrectly. Either that or the bandsaw frame is welded at an angle to the base, but the motor itself, pretend this is the motor, is tilted. Not that much, of course, but it is tilted. Now I can adjust that, maybe I won't even bother, but I can adjust it by shimming down there, and it'll be a trial and error method, but if I need to do that before I adjust the position of the lower pulley. Now I'm going to take the straight edge and prove to you that the motor is tilted, at least in relationship to this pulley. Let me reposition the camera. Okay, with the straight edge up against the upper pulley, which you cannot see, and this is just a shim shingle, I'm using it as a taper gauge, like a crude Starrett taper gauge. So looking at the bottom here, the distance right there is up to my finger, and at the top, let me put it in this way, you can see I can virtually pull the shingle through. So there's about at least 3/16 of an inch of tilt on the motor. In spite of everything I have shown you, and there are probably other issues too that I have not noticed yet, this machine is pretty well built, really. But if they sold it at retail for about $1,000, that means they had to make it for about $250 or even less over in China for all the markups and shipping and all of that goes on in retailing. So this is not a Dual or a Grobe or anything of that quality. But have you guys noticed that in your travels you will very seldom see a vertical metal cutting bandsaw? As a matter of fact, you basically won't. Occasionally you'll see a Dual or one of those. They either go for a very high price or they almost give them away because they're way too heavy to move into a basement and even hard to handle in a garage. They're just a big machine, but they're wonderful. But we do need rigidity in a metal cutting bandsaw. And will this do the job? Well, this critique, this analysis was longer than what I expected. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed doing it. And that concludes this video. And in the next one, what I'm going to do is to start doing some of the repairs, such as cleaning this table and getting the rust off of it and making that guide and various things like that. I won't show all the details on that because it would be a 10-hour video, but the blades will be in a couple days. I may even try it, but I guess I can't even try cutting until I get this guide in the right position. You can see it's way off. So that's it for today on the Craftsman 15-inch bandsaw. This is Tubal-Cain saying so long for now and see you next time.